Elliot Graves caught his wife cheating during his own keynote speech. But the betrayal wasn't just personal, it was corporate espionage. What he did next, cold, calculated, and completely legendary. This isn't just a story about revenge. It's about building an empire from the ashes. Stick around, because this is how Elliot Graves burned the lies and built a legacy. The mountaintop air was crisp, the kind that whispered promises of clarity, and exposed everything hidden beneath the surface. At 8,000 feet above sea level, the GlassTech annual Winter Summit glittered like a crown jewel of the West Coast tech world. Aspen's elite had gathered under a canopy of ice-laced chandeliers, toasting champagne beside a roaring lodge fire, laughing too loudly in designer scarves. But Elliot Graves stood apart from the spectacle, half-shipped near the panoramic windows, sipping black coffee and watching his wife charm the room. Marissa moved like she owned the place, her silver gown catching the light in glints that made people stare. She laughed easily, touched arms in conversation, dropped industry lingo with the precision of a PR queen who knew the power of optics. The room was full of their world. GlassTech board members, investors, rival CEOs, all orbiting her gravitational pull. And yet Elliot saw none of that. What he saw was a woman he'd spent 10 years building a life with, and now a stranger he no longer trusted. He hadn't confronted her. Not yet. The messages he'd discovered that morning on her tablet still burned in the back of his mind. He had stared at them in silence, heart steady, not shattered. The betrayal was vast, calculated, and far deeper than anything personal. It was treason against his family's company. And now, standing here with the summit's AV controls synced to his admin credentials, Elliot knew what he had to do. The room applauded as the MC announced dinner. Marissa flashed him a smile from across the room. Elliot raised his cup slightly in return, hollow in his stare. Let them celebrate. The truth would arrive with dessert. It began with a mistake. Not his. Hers. Marissa had left her tablet unlocked on the dresser in their suite, still sinking from the night before. She was in the shower, humming something cheerful behind the steam-fogged glass, unaware that the glowing screen had caught Elliot's eye as he passed by, cradling a mug of tea. Normally he wouldn't have looked. Trust had been instinctive with Marissa. Until lately, she'd been more distracted, more distant, taking calls in the hallway, text beneath the dinner table, a dozen little cracks in the glass. He tapped the screen. At first, it was innocuous. Calendar reminders, team threads, a few late-night emails. But then came a message chain labeled, Adrian, secure. Elliot sat down. Dozens of messages unfolded, screenshots, links, and audio clips. Photos from their office, from after-hours meetings. Adrian Blake, Marissa's executive assistant. Young, sharp, arrogant. Their exchanges were intimate, yes, but what made Elliot's stomach twist wasn't the affair. It was the plan. They weren't just lovers. They were co-conspirators. Together, they'd been siphoning client data from GlassTech's internal servers, preparing to launch a stealth startup using stolen intel and Elliot's own security framework. They joked about how Marissa had access to everything thanks to her marriage. Adrian had even written, "He's brilliant but oblivious. Let's bleed the empire dry while he's busy raising that kid." That kid. Leo. Elliot stared at the screen for a long time. No outburst, no shattered glasses or accusations. Just a still, simmering silence as he copied everything onto a private drive and locked the tablet again. Marissa emerged from the bathroom, hair in a towel, kissing him lightly on the cheek before breezing past to pick a dress. "Big night," she said, rifling through her suitcase. "You ready?" He watched her from the doorway. "Almost," he replied. His voice gave nothing away. She had no idea what was coming. But by the time she stepped on that stage tonight, the audience would no longer see a power couple. They would witness the quiet man in the shadows burn her empire down with one tap of a button. The evening unfolded like a carefully choreographed play. Waiters in pressed uniforms glided between tables, pouring wine, serving plated entrees, their movements as seamless as the string quartet tucked beneath a velvet curtain. Guests laughed easily, glasses clinking, unaware that the floor beneath them was about to crack. Elliot moved among them with quiet ease, his tailored charcoal suit blending into the backdrop, his expressions polite but hollow. Every step he took was deliberate, every word he spoke a mask. He had already accessed the summit's AV booth under the guise of last-minute adjustments to his presentation. The hotel technician, eager to please, had stepped aside without protest. Elliot's login credentials gave him full control of the screen feeds, sound system, and video inputs. One specific channel had been queued labeled A, Blake Marissa's synced cloud messages and video clips to autoplay once the feed activated. A flawless, inevitable detonation. "Everything okay, Mr. Graves?" the AV tech had asked earlier, wiping his hands with a cloth. "Just making sure we're connected," Elliot had said, his voice steady. "Wouldn't want any glitches during the keynote." Now, back at his table, Elliot sat beside Marissa, who leaned in close, her perfume subtle and expensive. "You're going to kill it," she whispered, slipping her hand beneath the table and squeezing his knee. "Biggest speech of your career." He nodded, eyes fixed on the main screen above the stage where the company's logo gently pulsed, waiting. Found them. Investors discussed quarterly gains. Journalists prepped for interviews. Executives sipped bourbon with the entitlement of men who thought their secrets were safe. And Marissa, the woman who had written "He's brilliant but oblivious," was busy updating her Instagram story. Elliot checked his watch. 12 minutes to showtime. The lights dimmed as the MC's voice echoed through the lodge's grand ballroom, calling for silence. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome one of the minds behind GlassTech's cutting-edge security infrastructure, Elliot Graves." Applause rolled through the crowd as Elliot stood, straightening his suit jacket, calm as glass before it shatters. Marissa beamed beside him, brushing her fingers across his shoulder, then settling back in her seat. She whispered, "Make me proud," not realizing the irony in her words. Elliot stepped onto the stage, his footsteps quiet on the polished oak floor. Behind him, the company's logo faded into a glowing pulse. He approached the podium, placed both hands on it, and let the applause settle into silence. A spotlight caught the edge of his jaw. His voice, when he spoke, was soft but sure. "Before I begin," he said, "I want to share something even more important than technology or profit." The screen flickered. At first, the image was a little grainy, the kind of blur you get from a quick video call. A woman's face appeared, tousled hair, smug smirk, a silk robe just slipping from one shoulder. Adrian's voice came next, clear and unmistakable. "Are you sure no one suspects?" he said with a laugh. Marissa's voice followed. "Please. Elliot's too busy being noble. Honestly, I think he still believes we're just tired from the kid." Laughed. In real time, the crowd froze. "GlassTech's client list is gold," Adrian continued. "Once we launch, half this room will be working for us." "I've already exported the cloud backups," Marissa replied, sipping wine. "They won't even know what hit them." From the audience, gasps. Phones slipped from hands. Forks clattered against porcelain. Elliot didn't move. Marissa, pale as frost, bolted to her feet. "Elliot," she hissed, "turn it off. What are you doing?" He finally turned to her, his voice calm enough to slice steel. "Introducing your true keynote, Marissa." On screen, she laughed again, past self unaware of her own destruction. "To GlassTech," she said, raising her glass. "A stepping stone to something better." The screen went black. For a moment, no one moved. Then murmurs exploded across the room like fire through dry grass. Walter Glass, founder and CEO, stood motionless, his jaw clenched. Marissa turned to Elliot, horror contorting her features. "This isn't what it looks like," she started. Elliot held her gaze. "No," he said, "it's worse." He left the stage not to applause, but to stunned silence broken only by the rising storm of scandal, the kind you never walk away from. The ballroom was no longer a place of celebration. It had become a crime scene made of broken reputations and shattered trust. The murmur of voices had risen to a cacophony as guests exchanged hurried whispers and executives frantically tapped at their phones. Marissa tried to speak to Elliot as he exited the stage, trailing behind him in heels suddenly too loud on the hardwood. "Elliot, listen to me, please." He didn't stop walking. Security, already alerted by the AV team, approached her at Walter Glass's silent signal. "Ma'am," one of them said with a grim politeness, "we need you to come with us." She paled, disbelief giving way to rage. "Are you serious? You're dragging me out of my own company's—" "It's not your company anymore," Walter said from the foot of the stage, his voice colder than the aspen air outside. "And it never will be again." Elliot reached the lobby where his parents were waiting with Leo. His mother stood with the boy in her arms, confusion in her eyes. "What's going on, sweetheart?" He took Leo gently, holding him close. "We're going home." By the time they stepped into the snow-dusted night, Marissa was being escorted to a private conference room by internal legal counsel, and Adrian Blake's name was already flagged on the GlassTech server as a breach threat. Within the hour, his building pass would be revoked and his laptop seized. Upstairs in Walter's private suite, Elliot handed over a flash drive. Every message, every file, audio, video, timestamps. Walter looked down at it, then back at him. "She thought we wouldn't find out." "No," Elliot said. "She thought I wouldn't fight back." Walter nodded once. "And now?" "No," Elliot replied, cradling Leo against his chest. "We burn the rot out of the walls and rebuild from the inside." In the days that followed, GlassTech's crisis response team worked around the clock. But Elliot's preparation had ensured there were no data losses, just reputations burned clean to the bone. Marissa's GlassTech credentials were revoked by dawn, and by noon she was officially suspended pending legal investigation. Adrian Blake, who'd tried to quietly slip out of the state on a red-eye to Chicago, was intercepted at the airport by federal cybercrime agents tipped off by the company's legal counsel. His devices were confiscated on the spot. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was criminal. The messages, files, and call logs Elliot had retrieved made it clear. This wasn't a fling. It was corporate espionage. Their planned startup had a name, a roadmap, a list of stolen clients, and even NDA-signed investor decks. With the FBI now involved, the case escalated from internal misconduct to federal charges. Meanwhile, GlassTech's board of directors met in a closed-door emergency session. Walter Glass, still seething from the public embarrassment, proposed Elliot step in as interim chief security officer, a role Elliot hadn't asked for but accepted with quiet resolve. He had already proven more than competent, trusted, unflinching. Clients, initially spooked, began calling, not to withdraw but to express support. Most had worked with Elliot personally, respected his discretion, and now admired his spine. "If you're steering the ship," one of them told him over a secure call, "we're staying on board." Marissa, once the media darling of GlassTech, had become persona non grata. Her legal team tried to negotiate, but Elliot refused to engage personally. Everything would go through attorneys now. Everything had changed. He wasn't just cleaning up a mess. He was rebuilding the kingdom, one firewall at a time. By the end of the month, the halls of GlassTech pulsed with a new kind of energy, focused, lean, and watchful. Elliot had assumed the role of chief security officer not as a placeholder, but as a force of reformation. The old, complacent digital infrastructure built on trust and reputation was torn down piece by piece. In its place, Elliot installed protocols so secure they rivaled government encryption, rebuilding the company's foundations with his own hands. He wasn't just protecting the company from external threats now. He was guarding it from the people who once claimed to love it. He didn't waste time on the politics. Let Walter handle the boardroom backslapping. Elliot buried himself in the code, the audits, the training sessions. His office, once tucked behind Marissa's PR suite, was now at the heart of the tech floor, a glass-paneled command center overlooking the entire department. And people noticed. New hires began referring to him in hushed admiration. Talia Chen, a fiercely intelligent junior analyst fresh out of MIT, quickly became his right hand, helping to prototype a new behavioral monitoring system that could detect insider threats before they bloomed. She reminded Elliot of who he used to be. Brilliant. Raw. At home, Leo adjusted better than Elliot expected. He clung to his father now, not in fear but in trust. Nights were quieter. Mornings had meaning. Elliot had replaced the sound of Marissa's laughter with the clicks of building blocks and bedtime coding apps. There were moments, still, where the silence threatened to echo. But Elliot filled those spaces not with anger. He filled them with progress. The empire he was building now wouldn't need charm or illusion to survive. It would run on truth, skill, and steel. 1 year to the day after the scandal shattered everything, Elliot stood at the helm of a vastly changed glass tech leader. Smarter, and no longer built on appearances. The annual Winter Summit had returned, this time in Berlin, rebranded as the Global Cyber Defense Conference, hosted by none other than Elliot Graves, now officially CEO. His keynote address, streamed live to over 2 million viewers worldwide, showcased not only GlassTech's new proprietary threat detection system, but the man who had quietly risen from betrayal to build a digital fortress on the ruins of deception. Behind him, charts and metrics spoke louder than applause. GlassTech had seen a 63% increase in global contracts, a 40% jump in public trust ratings, and had just opened its 5th international security hub, this one in Singapore. Clients that had once flirted with competitors now sought exclusivity. Governments knocked quietly at the company's door. Marissa was no longer a threat. She was a case study. Convicted of corporate espionage and wire fraud, she had begun an 8-year sentence at a federal facility in Virginia. Adrian had taken a plea deal and vanished into anonymity, barred from ever working in the tech sector again. Elliot, however, wasn't focused on retribution. He didn't speak of Marissa. He didn't need to. The conference stage itself was the final word. Leo, now 5, watched from backstage with Talia, a tablet in his lap, and headphones on as he learned the basics of Python. The boy didn't understand what had happened a year ago, but he understood his father had built something important, something strong. Elliot's eyes scanned the room, full of decision-makers, engineers, and journalists. This time, the empire was his. And it was only the beginning. It was a cold, overcast afternoon when Elliot stood outside the federal facility in Arlington. He didn't come for closure. He'd already found it. But there was something he needed to say. Something final. Marissa entered the visitor's room in beige, prison-issued sweats, a shadow of the woman who once dazzled at galas and sold dreams in boardrooms. Her smile, when she saw him, was hesitant, hopeful, even. "You brought Leo?" she asked, eyes darting past him. "No," Elliot said evenly. "He doesn't belong in here, and you don't belong in his life." She tried to protest, leaning forward. "Elliot, please." He raised a hand, silencing her. "You're not here to plead your case. That ended the day you weaponized my trust." Her mouth opened, then closed again. She shrank slightly in her chair. "I'm not angry anymore," he continued. "I thought I would be. But you know what I realized?" He leaned in just enough for her to hear. "You taught me something valuable. Fire doesn't destroy everything. Sometimes it clears the dead wood so something better can grow." Marissa looked at him then, not as a husband or a victim, but as the man who had risen without her. He stood, buttoned his coat, and walked out without another word. Outside, the sky had lightened. In the distance, his car waited. Leo inside, dozing in his booster seat with a coding tablet in his lap. Some ghosts didn't need to be chased. They just needed to be left behind. Elliot stood in his office overlooking the skyline of Singapore, the windows stretching floor to ceiling, bathed in the orange-gold hush of evening. On the wall behind him, a digital display quietly cycled through security metrics from Glasstech's global hubs: London, Berlin, Toronto, Seoul. It was a world he'd helped safeguard, not with bravado or revenge, but with precision, discipline, and vision. In the corner of the room, Leo sat cross-legged, sorting colored tiles in sequences. Early coding patterns, learned by instinct now. Elliot's assistant entered, placing a sleek folder on his desk. Singapore's Education Ministry wants you to lead a national youth tech mentorship program, she said. They say your keynote last month changed the conversation. He nodded without looking up. Tell them I'll build it. His phone buzzed. Another message from his legal team. Marissa's final appeal denied. Parental rights officially terminated. He didn't open the full text. He didn't need to. Instead, he stepped over to Leo, watching his son arrange the tiles into a pattern that mirrored binary. Ready to head home, bud? He asked. Leo beamed, nodding. They walked out together, past the photo wall where Elliot's image stood beside world leaders and cyber innovators. The old portraits were gone. This was a new age. A clean foundation. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction. It's reinvention. Not burning what hurt you, but building something stronger where the fire once was. And Elliot Graves had built an empire. The Fall of Glass Towers teaches a powerful lesson about resilience, clarity, and the strength found in self-possession. At its core, the story shows that betrayal, no matter how devastating, doesn't have to define your downfall. It can be the catalyst for transformation. Elliot Graves doesn't respond to his wife's deceit with chaos or rage. Instead, he chooses precision, restraint, and strategy. In doing so, he not only exposes the truth, but rises above it, turning personal destruction into professional rebirth. The story also highlights the importance of integrity in both business and relationships. While others built their power on manipulation and illusion, Elliot's quiet consistency and moral discipline ultimately win out. His success comes not from revenge, but from realigning his purpose, building something sustainable, meaningful, and future-focused, especially for his son. In a world obsessed with image and instant gratification, the Fall of Glass Towers reminds us that true strength is found in stillness, in rebuilding rather than retaliating. The greatest victories don't always come with applause or headlines. They come with peace, clarity, and the freedom to write your own legacy.